Thank you so much for the intro. And I'm very thankful for IAPM and the program heads, both Dr. Venugopal as well as Dr. Ganesh Kumar. I'm thankful for the opportunity, got the opportunity to interact with the people across India who's interested in this subject. So thanks for that. So with that, we can get into the session. Before that, maybe a little bit of housekeeping. And Dr. Ganesh, do we have any break in between? Because the session starts from 2 to 4. So are we planning for a break? Maybe
normally there is no break, sir. If you want, we can give 5 minutes, 10 minutes. Most of the session we are continuously running.
Okay. Maybe we can have a kind of a break between 2:55 and 3, or 2:50 to 3, a 10 minutes break. And then because there is a theoretical, we are going to talk about the different use cases, and then we are going to see some practical. I'm trying to cover as much as possible. So just wanted to have a break, and then maybe we will finish all our talk by 3:45. 3:45 to 4 can be a question answer session. We can now interact with the people. People can ask, the participants can ask questions, and then it can be a learning session for all of us. So can we plan in that way?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay. So good afternoon, one and all, and thanks for joining this session. So let us plan our session in this way. We'll talk about the introductions and then how it has been used in different industries. I come from healthcare, so maybe I will cover a little bit on the healthcare side also. We'll talk about, because the theme is on agriculture and we are sitting at the IPM. So definitely we need to talk about the agricultural use cases and then how predictive analytics is used in agricultural sector. As I mentioned, we will talk. We will see some codings like how we can do predictive analytics using Python, TensorFlow, deep learning, and then we will try to predict some useful stuff that we can see live. I will talk about that, and then, as I said, like we can have a Q&A session at the end. So this is our plan. Hope this is okay with all of you. With that understanding, I'm moving. Next, maybe I need to talk about my organization. I work for my healthcare technologies. We are into a healthcare domain. We provide entire solution for healthcare ecosystem, end-to-end ecosystem, like EMR, electronic medical records, EHR, and this is for overall IPD, OPD, and the entire healthcare spectrum. And the idea the company we started is like to provide enhanced experiences. Because these are all the systems, very old system, like 30, 40 years, people are been using it. But the thing is, when the technological growth has happened, the user experience has become, it was affected because people were, it was not based on what people want, what the patient want, what doctor wants. Instead, it was driven by applications, forms and tabs or something like that. So our idea was to design a EMR and EHR applications which were centering and keeping patient-centric and the healthcare worker-centric based on their expectations, how a healthcare system to be. And my role in this organization is like twofold. One is looking at the various opportunities in the ecosystem, healthcare ecosystem, and see that how we can make use of our data analytics and artificial intelligence to enhance the experiences of patients, doctors, and all other healthcare workers. Is there any gap? How we can automate? How we can make it quick? How we can make it more efficient, cost effective? All those things. The second one is on the R&D side, because we are in healthcare and we know AI and data analytics. A lot of research is going on at the healthcare side. We too picked up research areas. So we worked majorly in 2 to 3 segments, the disease segments or something. we have figured out a solution which is in the trial mode, currently helping patients. So that's the thing. So there are two things. One, I can broadly we can say that one is an operational side, another one is on the research side. Anyway, I wanted to give you a glimpse of that as well, because uh, when we say data analytics or data science and artificial intelligence, I think people use these terms interchangeably. People call it as a data science, sometimes we call it as an artificial intelligence. One way it is true, because there is a thin line between different things what we are talking about. Artificial intelligence in a broader term, under which we got all the subfields are available. And then the analytics, data exploration is one part. And second, another area can be cognitive analytics, like how we can make computer vision, natural language processing, and all other things. Like it is like mimicking the human behavior. Like, we are able to see, we are able to talk. So these are all the human behavior. We are trying to mimic those behaviors in terms of work settings in different industries and all. Those things we call it as in the cognitive services. So we'll talk about, before getting into the work, what we are doing. There are some statistics about, because with respect to the agricultural sector. So we know the statistics. So in order to feed the population of 9.2 billion, the same structure what we are doing, it may not be possible. Definitely we need to bring in a drastic change, kind of new methodologies in terms of production and managing, monitoring, enhancing the way we are doing agriculture. Everything need to be changed. So one of the big area everybody is eyeing on is the data analytics, right? Because we have collected so far so much of data, how we can make use of it to produce more with the limited available resources, and then so that we were able to feed the world the kind of population what we are expecting. We all know, definitely before coming itself, you all familiarized. Even I thought of asking you before starting, I forgot. Like maybe if you are interested, maybe we can have a question like, how many of you are directly involved in a data science or something in your day-to-day work? And how many of maybe different, we have got a 67 people available, participants available in this session. Maybe if some of, maybe you can even type in the chat. I hope chat is allowed, Dr. Venugopan, right?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. It is available.
Yeah. Why don't you write a one line saying that no, if it is in why don't you write your industry saying that no, I work for this industry. If it is an academic and then you are doing research or working for that, you can write _academic, retail _academic, or agriculture _academic, or you just write agriculture industry or in healthcare industry. Maybe we can have some 1 to 2 minutes. So yeah, good to see the responses people are writing. And data science, somebody is working, please say that, like started data science activities, and reading means like undergoing the data science, or already we are doing research on our respective fields using machine learning, deep learning, NLP, and all those things. So I'm getting a lot of responses, and yeah, many are from the academic side. So it is the right population we are. I hope I'm talking to, because when the knowledge goes to the academic and that gets expanded, like it multiplies, it goes in an exponential way, because the faculty member teaching to hundreds and thousands of students, the knowledge goes to the entire the population. I think that is an idea the AICTE and ATL program envision that particular aspect, and then trying to conduct such programs. So very happy to know that. So we got people from agri inspection industry, data analytics, and academics, and many other industries are coming up. Maybe we can wait for another minute. Again, doing research on NLP side, and then academic. Cool. And thank you so much for the response. So there are a lot of interesting things. So all we know is this is a big data is nothing, something like now it is the same data, but which is going beyond the existing current tools, like and which we cannot manage with the current set of tools, like what we have, relational databases or something. That becomes the big data that we all know, and we have got multiple. We are not getting into the details of big data now, but just we are covering what is the big data. So what is that? We are trying to predict the future outcomes based on the historical data, and based on statistical modeling, machine learning, and deep learning, NLP, and many things. So that's what we are going to cover today with respect to different industries. You have seen this earlier. So artificial intelligence is the ability of the machines to use algorithms to learn from data. The deep learning and machine learning is a subset of that. So deep learning is the is capable of learning from unsupervised way from the data on its own, whether it can be unstructured or unlabeled. Still, the algorithm can learn. Wherein here it is machine learning also similar, but here normal programming and machine learning programming, where machine learning programming, it has the ability to learn without being explicitly programmed. So that's a idea. Just to give a little bit of brush up on those topics. That's why I have added this particular content. Again, we can classify under supervised, unsupervised, and reinforcement way. So it can be task driven, it can be in a regression or classification, or it can be unsupervised. And so reinforced learning is algorithm learns to react on an environment based on the feedback what we get, and accordingly it will work. So just to imagine a kind of data what we are producing, even just in a human being, what kind of data we are producing. See that size of it. The 3D MRI is having a size of 150 MB, and so if it is in a 3D CT scan, it is in a 1 GB of data, and it is just so much of data, each and every thing if you add it up. So, and again, the important feature here is the yeah. The important feature here is like 80% of the data is unstructured. It can be images, video, or email, or some text things, text or images or something. We all know our from India. So what he said is like is the most important thing humanity has ever worked on. It is more profound than electricity or fire. So we all know the power of artificial intelligence and big data. But how do we make it more usable for people? Is it's like we cannot say that no, we are going to replace the system with the AI, and completely the entire process is going to get changed by the AI or something. So when we have the combination of human plus AI, then only the real benefit is for the people. So we cannot completely automating and then giving the entire decision making to the AI. Also, it's not advisable. Wherein we wanted a human in a loop, and we wanted to automate the mundane, repetitive task, and where you have got a huge data which a normal, any human being cannot process a single or multiple person together as a team. Also, it is very, very difficult to digest and get the insights from the data. These are all the areas where we can definitely use AI. But the decision making, we need a human in a loop. That is the message everybody is telling. And to imagine a kind of a data, it is there. There are 40 trillion cells in the human body, and then more than 1 million molecules in each of those cells. So just multiply these two things. That is the kind of complexity it is coming in. Maybe why we are worried about earlier, we were not going that detail in terms of. Now we are going to see some use cases where we are going very detailed about how the human being organisms, and now we are trying to see how the genes are designed. Now that's what we call it in genomics, right? So with that, the requirement for managing such a huge data, that's where the big data analytics and all the mechanisms started coming into the market. Again, we talked about as it's a kind of amplifying our skills, and it is to achieve the productivity gains, and which was not possible earlier. It is not going to the idea also not to replace completely, but how we can amplify, how we can augment the existing capabilities of the particular the industry. So that's an idea. So maybe we can talk about quickly what the analytics are being done in healthcare side. So managing X-rays, like we all might have experienced the one or other time we might have taken X-rays or something. When we take an X-ray and the X-ray is passed on to the radiologist. Radiologist will take some time, go through the minute details of it and understand what is the abnormalities in that particular X-ray. It can be chest X-ray, it can be these images showing the brain MRI. And so here the human being, you have a limited number of hours, and then you can see maybe you can work for 6 hours or 8 hours or something. So again, it is like based on your experiences. It is qualitative and it's a subjective. We can have a very experienced radiologist and doctors. They can just like that, they will find out, and somebody may not, they cannot find that efficiently like the other person. So that's where we have now all the computer vision based AI services coming in, where when we were able to train the model with a lot of X-rays and MRIs, annotated data, we were able to, the system learns even the very, very minute details where the human eye, it can easily, we would have missed that. The system is able to identify that. We have seen many use cases. So we have seen how the lung cancer can be detected using chest radiography. So look at the images here, like first of all, they will try to understand what is that area of the X-ray where there is an abnormality. And then they will give you the probability score saying that no, what is the probability? 85% there is a, there is a lesion, there is a, it is normal or abnormal, everything can be analyzed here. So here it can enable non-specialists to perform at the specialist level in detecting lung nodules and chest radiographs. Though let us say we have now a junior resource who started working on it, but how he or she can have the knowledge of like 20 years, 30 years kind of an experience. So with the AI system, when we are able to train the algorithm with all the complex scenarios, we were really able to have all the results through the AI system. These are some cases where this is hidden behind the heart. So with an abnormality score of 44%, This case was missed by 8 out of 15 radiologists. The same X-ray was given to 15 radiologists. 8 of them missed this particular issue, a nodal, wherein the AI system was able to do 15 out of 50. That is just to give an example saying that now where is the complexity and how AI system is able to perform better. Similarly, here it is diagnosed lung cancer in the right upper lung field. This also again, this case was missed 9 out of 9 radiologists. They were not able to identify at all. Maybe they would have identified the other side. This side they have not identified at all, wherein the AI system was able to do that. The same case, because it was hidden behind the diaphragm, so it was missed by the human eyes. The AI system has detected that. Similarly, we know the breast cancer, it is becoming a very good tool in terms of understanding that because we are in Bangalore, so we have got an organization called Niramai. It was led by Dr. Geeta. She has built an organization where compared to the traditional way of doing the breast cancer detection, they have done using thermal images just to take a photograph, understand the thermal, from the thermal images using deep learning, they were able to detect the cancer from the of the breast images. These are all the pancreas detections to appreciate saying that no, it is very complex. I think if somebody from the medical, they will understand saying that no, why this area understanding the even the minute changes will be difficult because there will be a lot of overlappings and then understanding what is what will be very difficult, but very carefully designed and annotated training system will identify what is the issue happening and it will give you the results. So this you might have seen in the in the news and all. So we got how we can understand the from the retinal fundus images, how we can understand the diabetic and other diseases. So just this is an example. This is an original images, and then we are pre-processing, and we are able to identify an age of a person using just these images. So it predicted as 59, actual age is 57.6. It is almost equal. And it is a male and female gender detections. It's accurate. And so they are able to identify whether it's a smoker, non-smoker, and diabetic. All these things can be possible just by analyzing the retinal images, right? So this is the message, and this is the method it has been explained to take an retinal image from a portable camera, and AI system analyzes it, and then you get a report quickly. So AI and big data analytics in human genome sequencing. We have seen that in a human body, so many cells and then so many molecules and all. Then now we are talking about the genome data. So how the things are done in the genomic side. There is a case. This is a small video I have. There is a baby called Sebastiana. She had started seizures, immediately after her birth, and doctor was not able to identify what was the issue at all. With all the knowledge they have, saying that no, this particular seizure, what is the reason at all? They do not have any idea, and then they say that like the baby is going to die because we are not able to help her. So then what happens, let me try to run a video. I hope the audio also you are able to hear it. Dr. Ganesh, please let me know if the audio is not coming for all of you.
Sure, sir.
Sebastiana, my daughter was so happy.
Are you getting the audio?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yeah, They kissed her, and they took her from my side. I couldn't stop looking at her. It's just amazing that she would turn kind of purplish color. It's green.
She was in a state of having intractable seizures. That's to say she had seizures that were continually going on. She had something called a burst suppression pattern. So her brain waves effectively were flatlined between the periods of seizures. And we know that even the short-term outcome from being in burst suppression that doesn't respond to first and second line therapy is associated with extremely high mortality in the first week or so of diagnosis. So
we decided that we wanted to know the exact reason why my daughter wasn't going to be with us. We wanted to know if it was going to happen to her, if in the future we decide to have another child, if it was genetic, what was the reason she was going. I mean, get an answer, even if it was after she was dead.
I was working on analyzing the genomic data and combing through and mining the data, trying to see if I can identify a DNA change or a letter change within Sebastiana's genome that might explain the phenotype and the symptoms that she was presenting with. Pretty quickly in the analysis, we identified this variant in the KCNQ2 gene that overlapped very strongly with their phenotype.
KCNQ2 is a really important gene. It has a role in moving potassium around in the neurons in the brain cells. It's a very serious genetic condition. About half of all of the kids will die from this disorder in the first year or so of life. And those that do survive, the vast majority of them will have very significant neurological injury.
Not only did we find the underlying genetic cause that was causing her seizures, but it also allowed us to pinpoint a particular medical management or treatment path that the physicians could then pursue based on this result. So we were able to deliver results for Sebastiana on day 8 of her life. So it took us from the consent to actually giving a verbal report to the physician in 5 days.
That ability to go from a molecular diagnosis to implementing treatment within a few hours was key to the dramatic changes we saw in Sebastiana.
We were happy. I can't. No seizures, none. Since she left the hospital, we haven't had an episode of seizures. So she's just, I don't know, breaking all the rules. Sebastiana, my daughter was so happy.
Yeah, so that is the story of Sebastiana. So as we have listened to the narratives, it was on day 3, doctors have given up the hope, saying that no, we are not able to predict what it is, and then not able to understand. And then when the genome sequencing is done, they were able to identify exactly what is the issue causing the problem. So it is called the KCNQ2 mutation was causing their seizures. So knowing this diagnosis, they were able to identify, and as the resource person said, they were able to identify the cause and then what exactly the medication need to be given. And the day 8, they were able to do that. We might have say a thing saying that no, what is the big deal in that? Because every time there is an issue, they find out. But the thing is, the way we are able to do a DNA sequencing in a very short span of time, within 3 to 5 days time, and then identifying exactly. Earlier, it would have been taken months together to do genome sequencing, and then it would have cost $10 million to do that for a particular genome sequencing. Think about these are all the normal family. They just for a baby they were doing it. Do you think like they would have spent 10 million? No. Now the price has been drastically reduced because of all the advances in the analytics. In the big data analytics and the predictive analytics, we were able to do the DNA sequencing as quickly as possible. When the problem is noticed, immediately we were able to do that. And this is an ECG analysis. And in fact, we are doing this in our company itself. I wanted to show that again. I have a short video. Yeah. So what we're doing here is ECG. Normally, we know we need to go to a hospital and we need to put all the legs and then the nodes and all, and then we need to take an ECG. Then that has been given to the doctors, and then they used to analyze it. But what happens, like there is a patient where they need to frequently take a ECG to check the conditions. So there is a device that just a packet size. It's like 10 centimeter kind of metal rod where you just keep your fingers. This device is through Bluetooth. It is connected to your mobile devices. When you have our applications installed in that mobile devices, it picks up the signals from the devices, and that information is fed to the deep learning algorithm. And then based on that training, what we have done earlier, it will identify whether this person is having any abnormalities or what, and under what class this particular person is falling in. Then immediately we can alert, either we can ask the patient to come to the nearest hospital, or we can give them some medication directly over phone or something. So this is like, think about somebody is in a remote, very remote, but they need a frequent, constant touch with the doctors in terms of managing their ECG and all. So this becomes a very handy device. So I just wanted to cover certain things. What are the other analytical and AI-based applications we do in our organization? So one of the things is, as I said in the beginning, we were working on the operational things as well as improving the operational efficiency using data analytics, as well as this kind of a predictive disease prediction using artificial intelligence. See, there is, I'm not sure how many of you know about this particular disease. There is a disease called Parkinson's disease. It is a neurodegenerative disease. So the patient affected by this disease, they cannot walk freely, they cannot express themselves freely, and the speech will get affected. And the success of treatment largely depends upon how quickly we were able to identify this is a Parkinson's disease, and then continuously monitor during the treatment period based on the medication need to be changed and all these things. So for that, the current practices are like, this has been handled by the expert neurologist. Maybe they would have spent some 15-20 years, then they will exactly know how do we identify the Parkinson's disease. They will ask the patient to do certain basic testing in person, and then they used to identify whether it's a Parkinson's disease or not. One of the tests is the gait analysis. Gait is like how the human movement happens. So they will ask the patient to walk forward for 10 feet, and then they will come back, move forward and backward for 10 feet. And by the way they are walking, the way they are getting up the chair, and how their heels, how they are taking every step, what is the heels amplitude from the earth. All these things are matters in terms of accurately identifying this particular disease. And so what we will talk about other things. I just wanted to explain that how we have done that. So here what we have done is like one way is, as I said, like doctors used to do that. But then they started doing further research how we can include some other systems to identify whether it's a Parkinson's disease or not. Then what they did is like they try to put all the sensors, let us say like ECG, put a sensors in the hands and legs, and ask the patient in a treadmill. So that's the kind of thing it was happening some 10 years back. So that's the kind of still some places if they are practicing like that. So the problem is already these Parkinson patients are affected by the movement issues, and asking them to run on a treadmill with all the sensors running around, it becomes very, very tough task. Also, it was not very successful. So in our model, what we have done is like, we just said like, we just wanted a image of the patient, means like video of the patient. You take a mobile app. So we have given a mobile app for a patient side. What we need is just a camera, microphone, and accelerometer. Nowadays, in every mobile phone is having that. So we ask the patient or the caregiver who is also along with the patient to take a video of the person walking forward and backward for a given place, any places. Then they can submit the video, and then they can say some audio also. And immediately after submission, they will get an acknowledgement for submission. What happens? This video is fed to the Parkinson disease AI engine, where we analyze this video. From that video, we were able to detect whether this person is having a Parkinson disease or not. That we will see that how we are doing that. So we were using the human body pose estimation. So when you have the, this is an image, actually we will be doing it in a video. When immediately after seeing the image, the system will imply the body coordinates in the images virtually. And then this happens, let us say our video, what we are taking is like 30 FPS frames per second. So in a second, we are taking a 30 images, and then each image, the body coordinates, like when we are walking, 1 second is like we would have moved from here to here, or we would have moved like this. So we are taking like 30 images, and we are measuring rate of change of each coordinates with the time what it happens. So there are body coordinates. 1 represent the neck, 2 represent the shoulders, and 12, 13. We know what it is. Like if it is in a 17, it is in a left ear. 16, it is in right ear. So we know that. So we ask the patient to walk, and we try to figure out what is the rate of change of each coordinate. Then all the data points has been converted into vectors, because like machine learning algorithm understand the numbers. Instead of numbers, it understands the vectors, and that has been fed to the deep learning mechanism, deep learning algorithms. So the deep learning algorithm will be trained. So this is during the training phase. What happens? We take a video of a normal person, we take a video of a Parkinson patient, and then we will label it. This particular sequence of data, we will be taking a video, converting that video into a data points in a numericals, and then from the numbers are converted into vectors. Those numbers are equally annotated, saying that no, this is an abnormal person, or it is a Parkinson patient or non-Parkinson patient, and all these things. And then that has been given to the deep learning, LSTM time series and LSTM based deep learning algorithm. And then we prepare a model, and then we test the accuracy, saying that what accuracy it is performing in the training side and what accuracy it is performing in the testing side. And then this model has been built here. As I said, this model is built on now implemented on this particular AI engine. So when you are submitting in a video, this AI engine runs on that particular video. It gets the inference, and the data is fed into the doctor app. So patients sitting at their home, let us say they are away from the hospital, some 300 kilometers or 500 kilometers away from the hospital, sitting at home, they can easily submit their video and seek expert opinion from the doctors. Assuming the patient has been identified as a Parkinson disease, the doctor has started the medications, but the doctor has to see the progress of the patient. So every month or every 15 days, asking the patient come to the doctor will be very difficult. So that's where you can sit at the home, you can just submit the video, and then the doctor will be able to do that. Also, immediately you submit, then he will get a pop-up saying that no, there is a new patient, they have submitted a video. To make it, that's what I am mentioning here, like we have talked about human in a loop. So here, it is not like the doctor has to entirely depend on the particular app. We say that no, when you are in a doubt, suddenly you say that no, maybe let me see that what is that actually. So we give the doctor the actual video how the person was walking, because we have collected that video. That video also we are giving, and we are giving the output of the PD engine, what it says, in probability scores. So the doctor very well can compare And then this is a kind of, there is a feedback mechanism for the system also to improvise. If the system is wrongly predicted or something that has been given to the feedback loop, and then we correct it into the update the algorithm, and then accordingly the new algorithm has been deployed here. So all these things are happening. So the doctor can see the AI suggestions, as well as he can personally see the video. Instead of person, he can see the video and then he can decide. That's where we call it as a human in a loop, where in kind of decision making. So this we have seen how this is working. The another important thing is like body hand pose we are using here. This is the bradykinesia is the one of the important test again, like a gait analysis, where the how we were, if someone is asking us to do like this is what it is, nothing big. This is the bradykinesia in Parkinson disease. If you ask us to do like this, we will keep doing for 10 minutes, also not a problem. But if you ask the Parkinson patients to do that, maybe after 5 or 6, depending upon the severity of the disease, they cannot do that very fast. They maybe the speed become reduced, or so many abnormalities happens. So again, we need to identify whether it is due to the Parkinson disease or any other neural disorders and all. But there will be a pattern for Parkinson disease, how the Parkinson patients try to do this bradykinesia test. So what we take in a human hand, and then once we apply the hand pose estimation, we were able to, it will apply. We can visually see in a video scene how these kind of coordinates are getting applied in that. This pose estimation is a big work of researchers from the MIT and Stanford. They would have trained multiple hand poses, and they are able to identify each and every point in the hand. That algorithm, we are making use of it and that particular framework. And then what we are doing is, once we apply the algorithm, otherwise there is no point, like how do you measure quantitatively, saying that what is the amplitude when I'm keeping the finger like that, what is the distance, and how it varies for person to person. It is very difficult to make the machine to decide, right? Human being, we will understand that also. Again, it's a subjective. We may tend to do a mistake, but when we are teaching the machine like this, the machine will understand, and it will understand each and every point. Even every bone is being identified, and these are all the markers it will do. And once the pose estimation is applied, again here we take all the coordinates, and then once we were able to identify this is the coordinate at the second one and second, how plotting over the time series, we were able to see that what is the amplitude and what is the speed and what is the distance. Everything we were able to do that. Then it becomes easier for see the abnormalities by making a carefully designed algorithm. Again, here also we do not only just you see the AI's output. Why don't you see the same coordinates if I plot it in a graph? Anyone can say that yes, this is an abnormal, like this is an abnormal. When you started seeing many of these. So we are giving options to doctors in both the ways. Like one is through the system. This is the system output we may give here. Here we will say that over and above we are giving the graphical details. Same happens. The Parkinson disease. Another area is like identification of the problem using the facial expression analysis. What happens for the Parkinson disease patient? The way we are able to express the eyebrows or lips or the cheeks, it is very difficult for the Parkinson disease. Their face become rigid. So even they emotionless, that kind of things. So what we're doing is like we keep a lot of different videos. It can be happy, sad, discussing different type of videos. And we are asking the patients. We have seen that here. The patient app is always available. Always available anytime they can take, and then they can just record like a kind of selfie video or something. When they see the video and how is their expression changes, that we are trying to identify by using the facial expression analysis. So any human being, whenever we are subjecting to this test, it will understand the coordinates. Where is the eyebrows are, where is the eyes exactly, where is the eyeball, And these are all the points we were figuring it out. And each and every coordinate, what is that coordinates, what is the changes it happens on the every millisecond, that all the informations are continuously fed to the system. And that way we do the training, facial expressions training using again the deep learning algorithm. So this is in a computer vision and plus deep learning. We are training the system, and then we ask the patient to record their selfie video, and then we were able to tell them. So similarly, what we are doing through the voice analysis as well. Like Parkinson patients tend to tend to have this kind of stammering, or they cannot speak freely, and but again, it can be for various other reasons also. Because if you go to speech alone, there is if you ask, then when we are doing the research. Initial days we submitted saying that no, we are doing a speech analysis. Then the speech expert in the university, the medical director, said to how many different speech issues are there. You cannot classify it. So it has to be for Parkinson disease. The people affected for the voice is totally different. So we need to train a lot of different voice issues. Male, female, age group of youngsters, elders, and all those things, and then we were able to pick up the right frequency from the voice, and that again we follow all the deep learning techniques, and then we were able to see that this is Parkinson disease or not. That particular area is still under research. We are continuing to research on that area. So this is pretty much covers like the.
Sir, sorry for interrupt, sir. I think 2:55 is time.
Yeah.
Break or something.
Yeah. We can. I think that's what I was about to say. So we will stop here.
Yes.
Maybe we will start by 3:05. Maybe.
Okay.
We have a 10 minutes break for people. Exactly. We can start by 3:05.
Okay, sir.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir. I would like to request all the participants, please take 10 minutes break. We'll be back on 3:05.
before we go on with the further presentation.
Yes, please.
Actually, after listening to this wonderful presentation, this really made us to think about like human intelligence and say artificial intelligence or machine intelligence, whatever you can call. Like it goes like how do we have a kind of a balance is a big issue. As far as the examples that you quoted were wonderful examples, as far as like you were talking about how AI and machine learning is used in health sector. But at the same time, suppose there are so many gray areas when you talk about human body, human mechanisms, how it functions. There are many diseases that are auto-cured by themselves. We need not have to go to the extent of going to the doctor, but the moment we get into this kind of diagnosis and use of machine, what happens is that we will end up in diagnosing many things which is not at all required also at some point of time. And this can cause a lot of anxiety, stress, and already we are a resource constrained society, our country, where this will all kind of lead to a lot of issues. I'm not saying the good part of the machine learning, what you have been sharing, but the flip side of the other aspects I also see, because many times there are many things that are taken care of the body by naturally by itself also. Just an observation. Thank you.
Yes, doctor. I think your valid point. That's where I think it is. See, what we are talking about is how, in a complex cases, how we have a resource crunch, how we have a mundane task where resources are limited, but the demand is high, and then how we can bring in the machine learning and artificial intelligence to treat that. But as you rightly said, I think even the way how we think in our how earlier we were treated. I remember, like, this is about, we consider food as a medicine, right? So we don't look for
absolutely
food as a medicine.
I agree with this point of view that food as a medicine. Yes.
Food as a medicine, and the way you conduct yourself, your lifestyle, like behaviors. Like how you conduct yourself, how do you eat, sleep, and where do you live, what kind of air you are inhaling, all these things makes the sense. So that is our rich heritage, our country. But still, we certain areas definitely we cannot avoid going to the new way of the new age medicines. And again, in the AI, what we are talking about is that there are certain areas, like still we have got now we are now coming about in the pandemic. We have COVID, so we need vaccinations. There is no other go. Still, we are not able to figure out that. And there are some this kind of pandemics. There are some life-taking diseases like a cancer. There are so many other areas still we were not able to solve, or it is becoming more and more complex, which it would have been man-made mistakes or whatever it is. But still, there is a scope where we need to serve larger population with a limited medical resources. It's not only medical resources, it happens in everywhere. Even if you talk about supply chain, there are so much of food is getting wasted in our country. The people from the supply chain, Dr. Ganesh can have a better statistics on this. So how we can avoid that, how we can connect all the dots, how we can get all the information together, put it in a dashboard, and make available for the decision makers and the farmers and the transport people, so that we can maximize the effort. So that's the idea, Dr. Magesh. Other than that, you are right. I agree with you. So can we move forward?
Yeah, sure. Please.
So quickly we'll see that, because as I said, ours is an agree theme. So we'll quickly go to that. Before that, I just a quick glimpse of what our team is talking about artificial intelligence and agriculture.
विषय है एग्रीकल्चर में आर्टिफिशियल इंटेलिजेंस। ये आने वाले समय में खेती के
स्क्रीन शेयरिंग is not there.
क्रांतिकारी परिवर्तन लाने वाला है।
Sir, you have to share the screen.
Oh, sorry. Okay.
विषय है एग्रीकल्चर में आर्टिफिशियल इंटेलिजेंस। ये आने वाले समय में खेती के क्षेत्र में क्रांतिकारी परिवर्तन लाने वाला है। देश के कुछ हिस्सों में सीमित स्तर पर किसान इसका इस्तेमाल कर भी रहे, जैसे बुआई और पेस्ट कंट्रोल के लिए ड्रोन जैसी तकनीक का इस्तेमाल आज अब धीरे धीरे शुरू हुआ है। इसके अलावा सॉइल मैपिंग और कम्युनिटी प्राइसिंग में भी टेक्नोलॉजी काम कर रही है।
So as our PM says, the opportunities are manifold. We can make use of AI and data analytics for agriculture. And this is another short video on how the
over the next 2 decades, a technological wave will revolutionize the efficiency of farms all over the world. It can't come soon enough. By the year 2050, the human population will be nearly 10 billion, which means we'll need to have doubled the amount of food we now produce. This is an examination of the agricultural innovations coming down the pipeline that will help get us there. The industry has undergone major developments over the last century. 100 years ago, farming looked like this. Today, it looks like this. And tomorrow, it'll look something like this. These changes have allowed many of us to do other things with our lives. In 1900, about 11 million agricultural workers produced the food for 76 million people. Today, just 6.5 million workers feed 321.4 million Americans. Two factors were most responsible for this surge in productivity: engines and the widespread availability of electricity. Today, the innovations on our immediate horizon include autonomous pickers. UK researchers have already created one that gathers strawberries twice as fast as humans. The challenge will be creating robotic pickers that can switch between all kinds of crops. Robots or drones that can precisely remove weeds or shoot them with a targeted spritz of pesticide, using 90% less chemicals than a conventional blanket sprayer. For the organic farmer, they could zap the weeds with a laser instead. This could have a big impact. The UN estimates that each year, between 20 and 40% of global crop yields are destroyed by pests and disease. Tiny sensors and cameras will monitor crop growth and alert farmers on their smartphones if there's a problem or when it's the best time to harvest. The Bonnie Rob can take a soil sample, liquidize it, then analyze its pH and phosphorus levels all in real time. As a proof of concept for all this autonomous farming technology, researchers at Harper Adams in the UK plan to grow and harvest an entire hectare of barley without humans ever entering the field. Companies like AgRobotics have already commercialized software that analyzes drone-captured infrared images to spot and understand vegetation problem this is, like a real The millions of people entering the middle class every year in developing countries are demanding tens of millions of pounds of additional meat. These ideas aim to get the most from every animal. Who would have thought Fitbits could be for livestock too? Cows are being fitted with smart collars that monitor if they're sick or if they're moving around more, which is a sign of fertility. Researchers at Scotland's Rural College are analyzing cow breath. Exhaled ketones and sulfides reveal potential problems with an animal's diet. Thermal imaging cameras spot inflamed udders to provide earlier treatment to combat a bacterial infection known as mastitis, one of the costliest setbacks in the dairy industry. 3D cameras quickly measure the weight and muscle mass of cattle so they're sold at their beefiest. Companies have even begun positioning microphones above pig pens to detect coughs, giving sick animals the treatment they need a full 12 days earlier than before. Less antibiotics are used if fewer animals become ill for shorter lengths of time. And a system of just 3 cameras developed by researchers in Belgium tracks the movement of thousands of chickens to analyze their behavior and spot over 90% of
So, a lot of interesting things we are trying to understand from here, like you all professors from the agri universities, you might have seen this earlier many times, but just to highlight, like we were able to identify exactly the fruit and from using the computer vision, and then we were able to plug it automatically using the robotics. So robotics plugging fruit is it is an old method, but are we are able to see the fruit, understand this is one right to harvest and not to harvest, and then plugging, that is important. And then we have seen how we were able to put the fertilizers and know how we are able to take out the weed, exactly pointing to the weed and putting the pesticides, or even advanced like using the laser, and exactly you should be able to classify between what is the weed, what is the actual plant. So all are using computer vision, and then again deep learning techniques. So that a lot of training goes behind that. One of the things we are going to see that now practically saying that now how these things are happening, and we can see that like code, how that code is getting generated, how that has been trained, and then we were able to predict that what is the things going behind these things. When we say that no, by the machine is able to understand and this is the fruit, and how does that happen, how the machine the data is fed to the machine, how the training happens, and after that how we are making use of the training data to predict with the new inferences. That's what we are going to see now. So there are, and analytical model, when we talk about agriculture, mostly people will be interested to see that weather predictions. There are multiple weather predictions model available, time series, ARIMA based, and so many other things are there. Due to the time constraint, I'm not covering that here. We will straight away get into the practical session. Before getting into the practical session, I'm just covering maybe the non-agricultural background people. Maybe we are going to talk about the cassava plant and what is the disease happening for this plant, and we are going to predict based on the images. How experienced farmer will understand, saying that no, if this is a kind of look the leaf is currently, then they will be able to identify, say, this is the particular disease, and then accordingly they can choose the right pesticide or the right method to eradicate the disease from the entire field or that area. So if you are not, if you couldn't identify what is that exact problem, then it becomes it becomes a big problem, and the particular farmer may lose entire crop, right? So that's where it is. So maybe the people from the agri background, they will understand that. So mostly this 50%, this is some statistics behind that. 50% of the current cassava production happens in Africa, and even we do a lot of India also. It is happening mostly in. We have seen a lot of this plants happening in Tamil Nadu as well as in Kerala. We have seen a lot of such things, and cassava roots and leaves are suitable for human consumption. There are different product, industrial usage, and food. Many things are there. We will not go to the details because then you are expert in that field. So just the idea of how the South Africa, what are all the different cassava productions. And this is in Indonesia, how this has been used. And straight away with this, I wanted to jump into the practical session where we will see how we are going to do this. I'm sharing the screen. Hope you are able to see this. Able to see this? Are you able to see this?
Yes,
sir. Okay. So the idea is we are going to predict the disease. What is the particular disease by just seeing the leaf image of the cassava plant. That is the problem statement. So this is of agricultural, that's the case study. I felt like many of you are from the agri background. You feel you find this useful and interesting. So how we are going to do that? That's what we are going to demonstrate. There are two parts in it. First section, what we are going to do is just we are exploring what is the data, what is the problem statement, what is the data available for us to do this work. And second session, we are going to do a training. And third session, we are going to see the inference. So this is the segment. We have got another 30 minutes available for us. So we have got a data set where what we need to do, as I said, like in case if we need to teach the machine, saying that no, by looking at the leaf, you should be able to say that no, what kind of disease it is. Then what we need to do is we need to teach the machine, saying that no, this is belongs to this particular disease, and these are all the different types of leaves it may look like, maybe a small, big, and whatever it is. We need to carefully teach the machine, and then that we need to train it, and then the training knowledge will be stored, and then based on that the output file, the inference will be happening. So we are just exploring here. So these are all the different frameworks, NumPy, Pandas. These are all the machine learning frameworks, Python frameworks, which is used for computing. And Seaborn, Matplotlib are the mainly used for graphical purposes, building charts or something. CV2 is for the OpenCV computer vision, how we are going to use this, and all other libraries. So we are just preparing ourselves for the testing. And we are keeping all the cassava leaf disease classification input. Input file is basically, we are going to do some 4 different diseases. We are going to see that now. And then we are going to see that whether that particular disease belongs to which disease classification. Because the moment the leaf is getting spoiled, as a non-agri person, I'll say there was something wrong, but we never know what kind of disease it is. So we are going to identify that also. We are keeping all the images here. I'll show you what it is and all. We are going to see that. We will see. Here, this is the come. Here comes it is. Maybe some of the experts can comment anything if this is correct, if there is a mistake or something. Cassava bacterial blight, cassava brown streak disease, cassava green mottle, cassava mosaic disease. These are all the 4 major disease which happens in the cassava plant. So we classify as if it is in a bacterial blight, we consider all those bacterial blight images as 0. We are going to label it as a 0. And brown streak, we are going to, to teach the machine purpose, we are going to label it like this, 1, 2, 3. And also we are going to train the algorithm with the healthy images also. The healthy images are like number 4. And so this we have done. Next is like count train images. How many images are there? Because somebody has given, we have asked our students or the farmers to share a lot of pictures about if it is in a grain mottle, they know, saying that no, we wanted to solve this problem. We are asking them, saying that why don't you share some images, take a photos and share it. We are asking all the people across the state or a country. Then we start collecting all these things. So we got everything stored in this area, because we know that it has been belongs to different categories. We keep it in a different folder. And then here what we are doing is we are telling machine, saying that no, consider if it is in a bacterial blight, it is in a 0. And then we are just counting, because there are so many images are there. Through system, what we are doing is like counting. So when we execute this file, and we are coming to know that there are 21,397 images are in the particular folder. And we wanted to see the dimensions, because we were able to, as a human being, we were quickly able to understand, saying, what is kind of images it is. It is a small, big, or whatever it is. But system will find difficulty. Here we have already done some pre-processing, and then we have done everything is under 600, 800 pixels. So this is like 1080 by 900 kind of pixels, the entire thing. So this particular image is like 600 by 800 images. That's what we have. The height and width of the images for the training purposes. Are we clear up to here, or maybe we can talk if we can discuss? We are just taking the images for training. We are going to train the machine to understand what are all the different leaves it look like when it is affected by these 4 categories of disease, particularly in cassava plant. Are we clear? Can I see some hand symbol or something?
Yes, sir. Clear.
Okay. Fantastic. Thank you so much for the feedback. So, and then we go and we are mapping with the class name. So that's what we are saying. There are different images. We say that no, this image belongs to this case, and then we create the data frame, and then we are reading the CSV from the training file, and then we are attaching that to a particular images, and then for the training purposes we are doing this. And then we get this many images, all as getting label is attached to that. And here we are doing the data exploration. We also know, we need to know, saying that no, this is like number wise. We are seeing, saying that no, what is the total number of files we are using. Wherein we wanted to know how this has been segregated under the different diseases, because it is collection. It's practically we collect this information from the field, right? We cannot say exact count. I need 1,000 or something. Maybe there may be, depending upon the geography, what is the diseases, going high or low, depending upon the nature of the geography and all those things. We might receive different images from the field. So all this field, just we are counting, saying that no, by class name, here we have divided by class name, and here we are saying that no, count plot, we'll say that no, by class name, we are again playing with the data frame, training data frame. We are just plotting against the class name. So cassava bacterial blight is around 1,000, and cassava mosaic is in a very highest. It is going beyond 12,000, and brown streak is there's the numbers, and healthy also we have. This is the numbers we have. We ran this, and then we wanted to see that like how the images for every class look like. So we will be running the for loop inside that particular folder. Let us say label 1 or something, and let us see what is that. Image we are getting it. So we are collecting the images, and then here is, this is in a function, and here we are doing we are calling that function visualize match. Visualize match image IDs and labels. Image ID labels belong to that particular folder. Then we see a sample of images. Maybe we are not trying to put all the images. We are trying to have only sample 9 images. So we can also see that, okay, this is cassava mosaic diseases. Maybe my images are right. I'm feeding the right images. So these are all the samples. You can also verify, because if you are a domain expert, you can very well see that, oh, this is not a mosaic disease. This may be a brown disease or whatever it is. So just for a quick idea, am I putting the right images in the right folder? For that purpose, we have doing this. And similarly, the next set of images, same thing we are doing here. Here we are first counting what is the total number of images. Cassava bacterial blight, and then we are seeing it. Here it looks, for a human being, yes, it is very easy for us to understand, saying that no, by looking at maybe the experts, they will say that, oh, this belongs to the bacterial blight, but we are teaching the machine. So we are carefully telling them, saying that no, this is what it is, cassava bacterial blight, and just we are verifying for our purpose during a training. We should not make any errors. We are ensuring that this is the right image, we are feeding it. Same thing, it goes here. The next class number 1. What is that class number 1 is? Here we need to remember these things. It is like brown streak and green mottle mosaic diseases. So we have seen this. This we have seen, and we will run this. And this is 2,189, and this belongs to class number 1. And cassava green mottle, this is what it is. Just we are keeping image just for reference purpose, so that when we look for class number 2, we should get the similar images. We are running that. So these are all that many number of 2,386 it is trying, and it is picking only sample. Automatically it is picking 9 samples from this bunch, and that it is displaying. And then class 3, this is the basic look how it is happening. Mosaic-like patterns, that's why maybe the mosaic diseases. Excuse, I'm not a agri expert. So this is the class 3. mosaic diseases. Here also we are doing the visualization. So why we are doing all these things is like we need to ensure a small mistake in the training will create a lot of biases and it will totally, the accuracy will go down. That's why we are just collecting, organizing all the images in a folder, and then we see what is the count, and each count we see that is it the same image what we are talking about inside the folder, all we are talking about. So the one, and then that's it. So in this code, we are just doing reading the data, ensuring what is the number of count and is how it look like, how we are classifying and giving a label to each image. We have a label and we are attaching that label because we need to tell, oh, this image belongs to bacterial blight. If you are looking at this kind of images, it is related to cassava mosaic disease, CMD. We need to tell with 2000 and odd images, we are going to tell again and again to the machine saying that no, this kind of images belongs to the mosaic diseases. How the machine is understanding this, how it is reading and how it is getting that, we are going to see it in the next section. So are we clear up to this? Any questions?
Yes, sir. Yes.
Okay, cool. So we will go to the next section now. So here I wanted to talk about a little bit about various image analyzing techniques because that is again a separate session. We need to talk about how the image analysis happens in the computer vision and in deep learning. But to quickly share you something, the kind of the network what we are using here is like ResNet. ResNet is a model which has been built on ImageNet. ImageNet is again a large collection of images where it belongs to 1,000 different classes. It's very big in size. So this ResNet has been trained on this ImageNet. It is able to given any image, it will tell you what it image belongs to. So there are 1,000 different classes in a car, a fish, a plane, or a ship, or whatever it is. They have collected 1,000 images. With that, they have built this model. So here, what we are using is in our application, we are going to do the transfer learning. Transfer learning is nothing but we are making use of already a successful model. We are doing a fine tweaking at the beginning and the end little bit, and we put our training area in that particular last layer, and then we are trying to get the output what we are trying to, because this ResNet actually it belongs to it will predict among the any image, it will try to understand from the 1,000 classes or something. But here we have got only 5 classes, 5 different diseases. So that fine tuning will do. But doing this big training may need a lot of GPUs and a number of resources and all. So that's where the transfer learning is coming into effect. And we can easily take that model, existing model, just to do a fine tuning at the input as well as in the output layers, the way we wanted it, customize it, and then retrain. That's what we are going to do here. So this is the algorithm where we just initiate again with pandas and matplotlib. This is for initial visualization. And then we list what are all the particular folder contains. And then we check again here because the previous this one was just an exploration. And currently what we are going to do is the actual training for the cassava leaf. So we ensure that the folders, what are all the different files are available. Train.csv is there, train images is there, and sample submissions, train TF records, all these things are available. So again, here we are exploring the train and test folders. what is the folder contains. Is it in the right images? Just we are checking that. It's just we are reading that file inside what is there and then displaying it, nothing else. And then again, here we do a quick count of each class. We know already how many classes this third class is having, going beyond 12,000. And these are all the trending between less than 1,000, 2,000. And train and test path in the directory. We tell them saying that, no, this is the image. I kept you the train images. Normally what we do is like in the machine learning and deep learning, when we have data available, as I said, like let us assume that we are collecting images from far places, all the farmers or student community. We don't want to waste all the images for only training purposes. We keep, let us say, 90% of the images for training purposes. We need to validate also that for that we don't have any other data. So this data itself, 10% images, we just keep it for a test. There are places where we do 70, 20, and 10, where we do a train, test, and validations. And time again, over time, we will be testing again the validation. So here we are doing a train and a test images. We need to run this. And then it is taken. And then we are doing some configurations. As I said, the ResNet and thing, to how do we see, if you look at this is a little bit of deep learning. So to go into detail, it takes a longer time. So there are different layers into it. This is a convolution layer, this is a max pooling layer. And again, there is finally, there are features and then fully connected layer at the final stage. And then we are taking an inference. So this area, we are just configuring all those details in a separate class. And this, we will be calling it as calling inside a program. So model name is ResNet 50. And epoch is the how many times we run over this program. So when I try to complete and get an accuracy of this particular system, it took 3 hours in the GPU. But for a time being, to demonstrate you, I reduced from epoch of from 10 to 1 so that it will run. Otherwise, if we run, then we will not be able to see the result at all. So just for testing purpose, I reduced to 1. These are all the what is the batch size, and what is the gradient, and so many other things. This we will understand once we talk about the deep learning and particular ResNet model and something. So this is the configuration file. We keep it separate. We run this. And then it is just in a configuration, so it doesn't give any output. And then here we are importing all the necessary libraries. sklearn, we are doing pandas, numpy, and tqdm. And this is where we are bringing in Torch, like in the deep learning thing. Either we can, there are 2 areas where either you can go with TensorFlow or Keras, which is backed up by the Google, or we can go through the Torch model. So we have gone through the Torch model. And there are various other packages. We all collect everything here and we just import the libraries. Because already it is done, then it has taken a quick time. So also we need to see any model when we are talking about, we need to see the accuracy of it. What accuracy the model has been trained, and then how it is working on various classes. For that purpose, we are writing our own functions. We are logger function, ctorch, and everything. So we are running that function, and we are dividing into, because again, one more interesting factor is when we have seen that, like in the previous class, the data exploration, we're seeing that like particularly this cassava mosaic disease alone, it has gone 12,300. Where in other diseases, we have got only 2,000 around. But when we have this data straight away, when we are feeding that, then it is a straightforward thinking, like it may bias saying that no, most of the images machine will understand again and again seeing this kind of images. So there is a tendency that anytime, whenever it sees a new image, it will try to, because it's a learning. So this becomes more weightage in predicting. So to avoid that, what we are doing is we are dividing that data set into 5 folds. So 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. And the total images we are dividing into 5 different buckets. So that if you look at 500 and 2000, it is overall within that kind of a range. And for that purpose, we are doing this. And again, when we are doing that, we automatically program it and saying that how equally we are dividing it, splitting it, and within how we are making it. And then this is a function for pre-processing the train images. There need to be some pre-processing need to be done, because again, here the image size what we have seen is 600 by 800. To 600 means like in the screen, it can be 1/4 of the screen or something bigger than that. So it will be unnecessary resource wastage in terms of maybe for human being, we feel like, oh, it is good to see a big picture or something. System is going to see in a totally different way. It is going to see that RGB values and all of the stuff, each and every pixels will be converted into vectors and all those things. For that, we are dividing into very smaller dimensions that we will see here. We will be reducing the size of it up to 240 pixels instead of 600 by 800. And after that, what we are seeing that like after doing all such things in the images, we need to say that no, still we are able to, the image is intact and there is no much deformation has happened. So we try to see that, yes, now we were able to see that the image is intact. And again, another interesting factor in the computer vision is we need to do a data augmentation. What happens when you, one second, when you try to train the images, it look like it will see the images like this. If I'm giving the mirror like this, it will see and it will understand, and it will understand the different pixels of it and all. When I try to give the image like this, it may get confused. Maybe because it is rotated. Now it might not seen the images like this. So it might have changed. So the augmentation is nothing but how are we treating the images in a different perspective. There is a formula, there is a framework available where you treat the images into different things. It can rotate the images, it can flip the images, it can mirror the images. And this is where we call it as a data image augmentation and normalization for better training and management purpose. So we will run that. So we are doing that. We are ready to see that. And let us see how the image looks after we do the normalization. So after we have done that, the image is going to look like this, because here we have done all the things. In the coloring also, we might have changed. Instead of wasting so many layers, we will be choosing only the right layers, and then the image look like this. But this is absolutely okay for the machine. And this is one byte-tampered loss function is one of the latest loss function, which is developed by Google engineers to ensure the training is not affected by the noise function. That's where our particular this algorithm stands on the crowd compared to any other algorithm. In the Kaggle competition also, we were using this particular loss function where the noise is like, so we need to know only this images, right? This only the leaf and all the areas. There will be a ground, there will be the nearby tree or whatever it is. How we were able to ensure the training is not affected by the noise. That is the purpose of this tampered loss function. We write as this function separately and keep it. And then this is the very big function actually. This is the crux of this getting the accuracy. And here what we do is like, here now we come to the modeling the function. Here, this is where we start the modeling. We were talking about the ResNet. So as I said, we are changing the last layer of the ResNet. Primarily it was training for 1,000 cases. We need only 5 classes. So we do all the changes here. And from the ResNet, this is the pre-trained model. Here we are doing a transfer learning. We are not trying to make machine understand how the machine is trying to see the image. That part has been done. So people have generously done this work and share this kind of models, openly available, open source. From that model, we are taking that model. We are trying to insert our training data, and then we are going to see that prediction alone. So that's what we are doing here. And then we are checking the image against the original ResNet. How the same way, without doing all these changes, if I'm feeding this image to the ResNet, what is the output we are getting? There are two things. One is we get to know some numbers. From this, we can decode and we can understand what is this. Second one is we have built, so far from beginning, we have built so many things, and we know that like our algorithm is working and it is giving some output. We were able to feed our data into this particular ResNet and we are getting an output. Functions required for training to update the loss and accuracy metrics. So this is in a PyTorch function to get the loss and accuracy. This also we are running. And there are so many functions, and this is the function, important function, where function for validating the trained images, valid function. And this is for inference images. This is where we will be using it for afterwards, after the training, you got the final output file stored, then how do you work that? So that's where the inference files. And hope I run this. We have run this. And then we go to so we build the main function here, where we have developed a lot of functions, custom functions. How do we pre-process the image? How do we reduce the size of the image? How we are making it augmented so that the machine will understand whatever directions, whatever angle, if you look at, it should be able to understand this is the disease or something, and reducing the size. And we have made custom functions for validation, accuracy, and everything. All the thing we are calling here. Like in a training loop, we are building it, and then we are calling the things. Then there is a scheduler to put everything, and the model we are calling model equal to custom ResNet, and custom ResNet we have seen it here, how we have built it, and then this is done. Let me run this. This is the final function I'm going to run now. So last time it took some time to get the output. I think we are at a 348. I'm not going to, I'll just run. You will see that it is running. Last time what I have run, that output file, with that I will try to show you the inference. This is that file. Okay, train loop is not defined. We'll just check. We'll not waste our time here. This is the area where instead of 10 epochs, I'm running only 1 epoch. So when I complete all the things, and then I will get the output. That output I'll show you. This output will look like, I will get a file saying that no, these are all the different files. This is an output file. What we get out of this training process, right? And that with that we will be building a small web application. In that web application, the inference we are going to do that. I'll show you practically. So this is the web application we built. This is possible for everybody. You can run it on your local system. Even I'm not gone for any server or something. In my local system itself, a simple Python Flask server I'm running. In that filing, I'm making a small function. I would have made some nice UI and all, just for demonstration purpose. Assuming that like we have collected thousands of Cassava Leaf files and we have trained it. Now, what is the purpose? The purpose is how do we make use of this training and our model for now to be benefited for the farmers and the business people. So idea is, let us you give me any image, I will tell you what is the kind of disease. That's our problem statement that we are going to solve that. Maybe this what I'm doing is in the web portal. The same thing can be done in Android applications. Android application, I will develop a small application like this, where I'll just, person has to click a photo and upload it. That's it. Immediately they will get a prediction. Similar, same thing can be done on iOS, or in a website also we can do that. Now, for practical purposes, I am taking a website. So this website, it is a local host it is running. I'm running a program where it is just we were starting the file. I can show you that also, but quickly I will try to demonstrate here. So now we need to choose, we will choose any images, and then we will need to see that whether the system is predicting or not. Let me see whether, how is that choose file. So Cassava leaf detection. I have some test data available for me, and that has been classified under for each category, because we know that these are all the test files we have kept it healthy. Healthy is there, cassava, brown streak disease, bacterial blight or mosaic diseases, and green mottle. So let me take green mottle. Among these, any images we can take. Let me take this image, and then I'll open. That means this image we are feeding to this inference which we have recently trained, and then we'll try to predict. It is taking time. It is running on the images, understanding, and it is detecting as cassava green mottle. Maybe we will try with another case. This time it is test data. I will go with bacterial blight. Any image, anything, I'm 57. This one. It is doing the inference. It takes some time for doing that. Cassava bacterial blight. It is able to accurately predict this particular image. What you fed is I think we have seen this. I'll take another class, mosaic disease. Something. We'll see that. Hope you were able to see all these things, the inference. So what we have done is we have taken images, we have seen data exploration, and then we have quickly trained it. And actually this training takes 3 hours to complete, but for time constraints, I'm just giving you the output, because training in a GPU, then also it is taking 3 hours. The input size you look at, it is a 5.78 GB of data we are feeding it. And then finally, what we are getting is, this is the output. So any new file, take anything, test data, and brown streak disease, click that and predict, and you will be able to cassava brown streak disease. So it is able to accurately detect with the given 20,000 images itself. Think about similar problems in your work area, research, whatever it is. If you are able to train the machine learning, deep learning algorithm, when you have a trained data, you have a domain expert, when you are able to see that this is the problem, how I can transfer this knowledge to practically to all the people, how we can make it in a mobile application, web application, you can do such things. This is one example of predictive analytics particularly in agriculture sector. How we are able to train that quickly. Even this is possible, even though this is in a 3 hours process. So it is possible one day, maybe that how you are collecting, organizing images and all, it takes some, maybe probably within a week or 10 days time, when you have all the data available, you can train and deploy a model. And building again a web application or a mobile application takes another. So very well, a new application can be launched in a month's time with a small team, 5 to 10 member team, together sit and make a program, and then you will be able to do that. Where definitely very experienced farmers, by looking at it, they will tell, but that knowledge may not be available with all the people, new farmers who are starting doing the business on the particular cassava plant. It may not be possible, right? So for that, we are bringing in all the experiences what we are gained. In place of 21,000, if you have put some 40,000 or 80,000, that model becomes more and more accurate. Any kind of images when we are feeding inside, then it will be able to give you the predictions. So hope you enjoyed this particular thing. And yeah. Any questions here?
I think now I would like to call upon a participant. Now session is open for questions.
Yeah, please. Any questions on the previous session? Because we didn't cover that also in this session. Previous session is more of like we have seen how predictive analytics, big data analytics, and AI and machine learning used in the healthcare and other industries and even in agriculture industry. Second session, predominantly, we have seen exactly the code, Python code, deep learning. Specifically, we have worked on ResNet architecture in a deep learning. And then with that, we did a transfer learning. And we were able to quickly predict what is that particular disease among that 5 classification. It can be 10 classification. Anything can be done. So this is that. This is what we have seen. Please. Yes, Doctor. Yes, Dr. Mahesh, please go ahead. You are on mute.
So would like to call upon Dr. Mahesh. Yes, sir.
Yeah. Basically, this hand raise, probably I didn't lower my hand raise. It was for the last.
Okay.
I had already asked you. Yeah.
Okay, no problem. That's fine.
But definitely, I should compliment the way you patiently try to explain each and everything in spite of the time constraint and other things. My only suggestion is that see, we do. This is a wonderful platform, especially where different kinds of people come together to attend this kind of a program in a short duration of time. But ultimately, we should also not miss out on this opportunity where if there are some interested, like-minded people who would like to pursue further and take this forward in terms of working together from various disciplines and see how we can integrate wherever it is possible all this learning.